Britain has just stumbled straight into one of the most awkward and embarrassing diplomatic moments.
And it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
In recent memory, this wasn't a small slip or a quiet misunderstanding either. It was loud, public, and impossible to ignore, the kind of moment that makes allies pause and the internet react instantly. The United States, Britain's closest and most dependable ally, released an official government report labeling the country as authoritarian. Not concerning, not slipping, but outright authoritarian. What makes this hit even harder is the timing.
Collective West, the transatlantic relationship, our NATO allies, certainly the United States under the Biden administration, got a little too comfortable with censoring rather than engaging with a diverse array of opinions. So that's been my view. Obviously, I've raised some criticism and concerns about our friends on this side of the Atlantic. But the thing that I'd say to the people of England or to anybody else, to David, is many of the things that I worry most about were happening in the United States from 2020 to 2024. I just don't want other countries to follow us down what I think was a very dark path.
The statement dropped while America's incoming Vice President, JD Vance, was literally staying as a guest in the Foreign Secretary's own home. It was the political equivalent of inviting a close friend over, setting the table, and then watching them stand up, point at you, and call you out before dinner even starts. British politics seems to attract moments like this, messy, uncomfortable, and impossible to spin. And here's where it gets worse. Washington didn't soften the language or send quiet signals behind closed doors. The criticism was placed inside a formal human rights report, fully public, and open for every government, journalist, and watchdog group to dissect. This wasn't a subtle nudge.
JD Vance, of course, the Vice President, have a listen. He's been very, very strong on this whole issue of free speech, in particular, free speech outside America, such as here. We want here on JD's radar. Here he is talking the other...
Yes, ma'am. In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension, American citizens. So that is...
It was a full spotlight moment, putting Britain's issues on display for the entire world to examine. This was no careless comment or off-the-cuff jab. It was a calculated move, timed with precision, landing right at the centre of Britain's democratic image, while Vance was quietly enjoying tea in the English countryside. The message was sharp and deliberate. America's leadership was sending a warning that Britain's democratic systems are drifting into dangerous territory, and they weren't whispering it behind closed doors. That instantly raises the uncomfortable question everyone's now asking. Why did America decide to confront Britain so openly and so publicly? The report doesn't dance around it. The core issue is free speech. Washington accused Starmer's government of tightening limits on expression at an unusually fast pace, faster than allies are comfortable with. The first example they pointed to was the government's hard-line response to the Southport riots. Instead of encouraging open debate, Starmer's team leaned on social media platforms, including major American companies, to remove posts they claimed were spreading false information in the United States. To Washington, that crossed a major line.
Those two lost, but we got along with them also. We have a very good relationship with...
They viewed it as government-backed censorship, the exact kind of behavior Britain used to criticize in other nations. The word they chose said it all: grievous. A term that signals this isn't a small slip anymore, but a pattern of serious and systemic overreach. America's criticism didn't stop at censorship. The report also flagged new rules around public spaces that allow police to penalize even silent prayer in certain restricted areas. The idea that someone could face punishment simply for standing quietly shocked officials in Washington, who described it as a step toward policing personal belief itself. Then came the Online Safety Act, and this is where things really start to feel heavy.
Administration is so forthright in talking about these issues, no matter who's in the room. But the question begs, Brad, is he right?
I think he's absolutely right about the United Kingdom and their sad decline in freedom of speech and freedom of press. I mean, you have thousands of people who've been arrested over the years because of things they posted on social media. That is not a free country. That is a kind of modern dystopia, an authoritarian state where the government can roll up with the authorities to come get you because they don't like what you have to say. It is sad to see that happen to one of our greatest allies, a beautiful nation with a long history and legacy as a beacon of freedom in the West. And I also appreciate JD Vance calling them out for it. But honestly, it will have to come from within. Their own citizens will have to stop standing for it, stop standing for the censorship, stop standing for the overreach, for the absurd policing. You see video after video where the police roll up on somebody for a crude joke that they posted online, or for asking someone, why don't you speak English, or any other sort of thing that's just fundamentally not a police.
Adults are now required to confirm their age to access large parts of the internet, and the law opens the door for government access to encrypted private messages. In plain terms, your online identity isn't fully shielded anymore, and personal conversations could be pulled into state view. That's a massive shift, and people are clocking it fast. Look at the bigger picture, and it feels far from old-school British freedoms. Instead, it starts leaning closer to the kind of surveillance warnings people associate with George Orwell's writing, and that comparison made US officials seriously uncomfortable. But if censorship raised eyebrows, the next section triggered outright condemnation. The report accused Britain of failing to properly address the surge in anti-Semitism. Since late 2023, Jewish communities have faced levels of hostility not seen in decades, and the impact has been deeply personal. The report cited disturbing incidents, from staff at kosher shops in London having to physically defend themselves, to a university chaplain in Yorkshire forced to relocate his family after receiving serious threats linked to his past service in the Israeli Defense Forces. These weren't abstract numbers or distant claims. These were real people, real pressure, and consequences playing out in real time. These were real families pushed into living under constant fear, and for the United States, a country dealing with its own serious struggles around hate-related offences, calling out Britain in an official government document was a major move. This wasn't casual criticism. It sent a blunt message that this issue goes beyond local politics and spills into national security and human rights, with global consequences attached. Then came the unexpected twist. While enjoying the warmth and generosity of his British hosts, JD Vance delivered what sounded like a clear diplomatic warning. He said America had made devastating mistakes on free speech between 2020 and 2024, and warned that Britain was now repeating those same failures, only at a much faster pace. That comparison hit hard. It was the political version of a dinner guest calmly telling you that you're copying their worst decisions, while still sitting at the table and eating the food you served. Polite on the surface, brutal underneath. With this wave of criticism closing in, most people expected the British Prime Minister to respond with strength and authority. Instead, Starmer delivered a response so fragile, it was uncomfortable to watch. When pressed on free speech, he didn't come across like a leader defending a core democratic principle. He sounded hesitant, uneasy, and visibly boxed in by the moment. He came off less like a confident leader and more like a nervous student, stumbling through a tough oral exam. At the exact moment the country needed calm, steady leadership, he projected hesitation and uncertainty instead. That contrast didn't go unnoticed. Meanwhile, America showed zero restraint. The report dropped the polite language and skipped any careful sidestepping. It stated plainly that Britain is now facing serious limits on freedom of expression, and that the government has failed to respond consistently when officials cross the line. That kind of wording is rare, and it lands hard. In the world of diplomacy, where criticism is usually wrapped in soft phrasing and subtle hints, statements this direct carry serious weight. The message underneath couldn't be clearer. Washington believes Britain has either lost its sense of direction, or worse, has stopped caring altogether. The irony here is impossible to miss. A nation that helped shape parliamentary democracy, introduced the Magna Carta, and influenced constitutions across the world, is now being told by its closest ally that it has drifted away from its own democratic foundations. That's not just criticism, it's a wake-up call, echoing far beyond Westminster. Britain, once seen as a solid stronghold of liberty, is no longer being held up as the model to follow. Instead, it's being treated like a cautionary tale, a don't do this example for others watching closely. The embarrassment is impossible to ignore. It feels like the original teacher of democracy being sent to detention by its own students, and that sting isn't fading anytime soon. This isn't some minor slip that disappears with tomorrow's headlines. Washington is treating this as a serious diplomatic moment, not background noise. The message is blunt and crystal clear. Britain has crossed a line, and if it keeps moving in this direction, it risks losing more than influence. Its credibility is now on the line too, even among allies who once gave endless benefit of the doubt. For decades, the so-called special relationship was seen as unbreakable, rock solid. But now the very principles holding it together are being openly questioned. When America starts doubting your democratic integrity, the entire world pays attention, and once that doubt sets in, it doesn't just vanish. Britain, once the standard others aim to reach, is now being framed as a warning sign flashing in plain sight. What was once treated as the gold standard of democracy is now being used as a case study in decline. And if Washington is willing to describe Britain as authoritarian in an official report, the real question is this: how long before Europe, the Commonwealth, or other allies start drawing the same conclusion? The wording may have sounded controlled, but the impact was deep and lasting. Britain is no longer being viewed as a steady democratic leader. Instead, it's being seen as a country drifting away from its core values, and that's where the real danger sits. Once a nation earns the authoritarian label, fixing that image is painfully slow. Trust begins to erode quietly, trade talks get harder, and doors that once opened easily start closing. Intelligence cooperation slows down, military partnerships turn cautious, diplomatic relationships grow colder. Allies start asking serious questions about whether Britain is still dependable or becoming unpredictable. This kind of decline doesn't crash in with chaos. It creeps in slowly, step by step, while the damage stacks up behind the scenes. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. Decline doesn't always arrive with flashing lights or dramatic announcements. It settles in quietly, normalizes itself, and reshapes expectations before people fully realize what's happening. By the time the alarm bells feel loud enough, the ground has already shifted. Britain now finds itself under a level of scrutiny it hasn't faced in generations. Every new policy, every restriction, every public response is being watched through a sharper lens. Allies aren't just listening to speeches anymore, they're studying patterns. And once doubt sets in, reassurance alone doesn't fix it. This is the cost of losing moral authority. When a country known for defending open debate starts limiting it, others stop taking lectures seriously. Influence weakens, leadership fades, and credibility becomes something you have to fight to recover. The real threat isn't isolation overnight. It's slow sidelining, fewer invitations to lead, less trust in private rooms, more hesitation where confidence once lived. That's how influence drains away, not with a bang, but with silence and distance growing louder every day. And here's the part officials don't like to say out loud. Once a country slips into this zone, reversing course is never quick or clean. Laws get locked in, bureaucracy hardens, and every attempt to walk things back gets framed as weakness instead of correction. That's how momentum traps leadership. Public trust takes the biggest hit. People stop believing explanations and start questioning motives. When citizens feel watched instead of represented, confidence drains fast. And that feeling doesn't stay domestic, it travels. Allies sense it, investors notice it. Look at how fast perception shifts once doubt enters the room. What makes this worse is silence at the top. When leaders avoid clear answers, uncertainty fills the gap. Rumors spread, assumptions harden, and suddenly the narrative isn't shaped by facts, but by suspicion. This is how reputations crack. Not from one law or one report, but from hesitation stacked on hesitation. Britain isn't being judged on words anymore, it's being judged on patterns, and right now, those patterns are raising eyebrows everywhere, and this is where the pressure really starts to tighten. Once a country's reputation begins to slide, every decision gets interpreted through that lens. Even neutral policies suddenly look suspicious. Every justification feels defensive. That's the trap Britain is edging toward right now. International partners don't wait for official reversals, they adjust quietly. Meetings become more formal, conversations grow shorter. Trust that once flowed naturally now comes with hesitation and side glances. Influence doesn't disappear overnight, it thins out until one day you realize the room feels colder. At home, the impact mirrors that tension. When leadership avoids clarity, public debate stiffens, people self-censor, discussions shrink, and a culture that once thrived on open disagreement starts feeling constrained. That shift doesn't require force, it happens through uncertainty alone. The danger here isn't collapse or chaos, it's normalization. restrictions become routine, oversight feels expected, and before long, what once felt unacceptable starts feeling ordinary. That's how standards quietly lower, and why warnings like this matter far more than politicians want to admit. And once this process starts, it's rarely easy to undo. That's the uncomfortable truth. What's happening now may only be the opening chapter, not the ending. If the government keeps expanding surveillance, tightening limits on free expression, and applying hate laws unevenly, these warnings won't fade away. They'll get louder, sharper, and harder to brush off. Today, it's America raising the alarm. Tomorrow, it could be Brussels, Ottawa, Canberra, or even Tokyo joining the chorus. Once enough voices speak up, the message becomes impossible to ignore, no matter how much spin is applied. So the question facing everyday people is simple but serious. Is this just a rough stretch in Britain's democratic journey, or are we watching the slow dismantling of democratic Britain play out in real time? For now, people can still debate, challenge authority, and protest openly, but even that freedom can't be taken for granted forever. If this breakdown made you think, drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs to see this, and hit subscribe because more deep dives are coming. I'll see you in the next video.